So Ben, aka Most Exhausting Player, was just here in town. He played another series of matches, which is going to be published on the Real Tennis channel in a couple of weeks. But sitting down, and I was in the commentary booth for all three matches, and sitting down and watching him in person again was just such a stark reminder to me how disruptive he is to normal tennis players who have normal skills and have really spent a lot of time and effort refining those skills to try to become better tennis players. And it just reminded me of all the controversy around who he is as a player, his aesthetic, his style of play. And the most common critique that I see on the internet about Ben is simply, that's not tennis, like the way that he plays tennis. And I want to address that head on and I'll give you a couple examples here that kind of help me think through this. And when I go out and play somebody who's kind of unconventional, I think having this mindset in the front of your mind is critical if you're going to have any chance of problem solving the match effectively and actually winning. So let's go through some other examples of sports, and there's kind of different variations and versions of different sports. This is soccer here in the United States, or football, and soccer is objective in the sense that there's no style points. You don't get any bonus points for how cool your uniform is or how pretty you look when you kick the ball. There's only one thing that matters, and that is, does the ball go into the goal more times than it does for your opponents? If it does, then you win, and if it doesn't, then you lose, and that's the end of it. There aren't any other ways that you can win a game. On the other hand, there's another version of soccer or football. This is called freestyle football. And there's tournaments and prize money and professional freestyle football players. And guess what? In freestyle football, you're judged by a panel of judges based on the difficulty of the tricks that you try to pull off and your style and the way that you put all the tricks together into kind of a program. And so this is subjective. It's somebody's opinion based on difficulty and style and skill and all those other things. And so it's judged. There's no way of scoring points against your opponent. It's you do your thing, your opponent does their thing, and then somebody else decides based on their opinion who the better performer is. All right, let's move forward. This is speed skating. Speed skating is pretty objective. You either go across the finish line first or you don't. There's no style points. There's no judges. There's nobody that says, well, you came in second, but you did it a little more pretty than the person who came in first, so you're the real winner. No, it's pretty straightforward. You either go across the finish line first or you don't. This is figure skating. This is subjective, based on the level of skill and proficiency and maybe gracefulness and the aesthetic of how you move and the program that you put together. There's a panel of judges that determines, is this person better or is this person better based on their criteria, and its opinion comes into the picture, right? It's subjective. Okay, one more example real quick. This is race car driving. This is objective. There's no style points for who has the better paint job. There's no style points for like how many risks you take or how cool of a driver you are or how aggressive or violently you drive the car. There's just one objective, and that's get across the finish line first, and that's it. Meanwhile, you can go to car shows, and depending on how well you polish your car and the upgrades that you made and maybe how rare it is, there's a panel of judges that subjectively decides who's the winner. Maybe there's different categories and stuff like that, but it has nothing to do with a measurable, like, oh, well, he got across the finish line in this amount of time and she got across the finish line. No, it's not objective at all. It's purely opinion. Okay, now let's go to tennis. Well, everybody seems to think that this is objective, and it is. How do you score points in tennis? It's not the style that you use. It's not how aesthetically pretty the way you move your body. It's not how cool your racket's paint job is or what brand of shoes or clothes you wear. There's only one thing that matters in tennis, just one. Who hit the last ball inside the lines? That will be the winner. The person who did not achieve that will be the loser. And there's no subjectivity to it. There's no opinion that comes into play. And yet, tennis players have decided, for whatever reason, that this is subjective. That I don't like the way he... And listen, if that's all you're trying to say when you make some kind of comment or post about Ben or any other tennis player, if you walk off the court after playing a pusher or somebody who's a defensive player, somebody who has less than stellar looking strokes, but hits the ball in the court one more time than you, you're fully entitled to have your opinion about whether or not you like the way that player plays, but you cannot make the statement that's not tennis. And you also cannot make the statement, I'm a better tennis player than they are if they hit the ball inside the lines more times than you did. Because that's not how tennis is measured. That's not how we determine who's the better player and who's the worst player. It's very simple. Whoever hits the ball inside the lines more times is the better player. And it doesn't matter who hits it harder or who hits with more spin or who aims closer to the lines. Now, those things certainly factor into whether or not one player can hit the ball back again. But if you make a mistake while trying to make them make a mistake, then they win. And guess what? They were better. At least in that point or that game or that match or that afternoon, if they scored more points than you did because they hit more balls inside the line, they are objectively a better tennis player than you. It's head to head. It is very cut and dry. This is based on facts and data, not feelings and emotions and opinion and subjectivity. Now again, you're totally entitled to your opinion about what style of tennis you prefer to watch, and you're totally entitled to your opinion about what style of tennis is more pleasing. But now we're drifting into like a different category altogether. Now this is, subjective opinion, and it's no longer based on data. And the data says that Ben plays at 4.5 in Atlanta, which is one of the biggest, strongest, it might be the biggest, the strongest tennis community in all of the United States. And he sent me a screenshot. I don't have it handy here, but over the last 10 years, he has a 60% winning percentage at 4.5. And we can look at the data and see that only 10% of tennis players who play USTA tennis are at 4.5 or above. So Ben is better than, objectively speaking, he's a better tennis player than 90% of the tennis players out there. Now that might make you angry, that might make you triggered, that might make you feel really insecure about the time that you have spent on your own game, but it's just what the data says. And I know that's frustrating when you work hard on your forehand and your serve, and you spend months and months dialing in, your grip and your contact points, and you hit against a ball machine, day after day. You hit against a coach day after day. And then you go out and you play somebody like Ben who doesn't look like a good tennis player, but he plays the game of tennis with a high degree of precision and consistency. And at the end of the day, that's what determines who wins and loses. So I think so much of this friction and so much of this frustration is because a lot of players and a lot of coaches, and I'll be honest, over the years, I've emphasized technique a lot in my content. And I've tried to balance it out and really emphasize also tactics and strategy and fitness and the mental game. And gear and equipment, not so much. I've only made a couple of videos on gear and equipment. But all of those things combine to determine who's more effective at hitting the ball inside the lines one more time. And all of those pillars have to be mastered if you want to be the best version of your own self on the tennis court. And Ben just so happens to over-index on things like mental toughness and things like fitness and things like tactics and strategy. He's really a master of those things, and he's largely ignored technical development and trying to make himself look like a pretty tennis player, make himself look like a high-level tennis player. He doesn't really care about that. He just wants to win. So the reason why practically this is important is if you're viewing the game of tennis through a subjective lens of that player looks good and that player looks bad, then when you go and play a player that looks bad through an aesthetic lens, how in the world are you going to effectively problem solve and pick apart their weaknesses and their strengths, and what patterns are working, what patterns are not. Because you're so sidetracked and like so triggered and focused on how am I losing, to this player? How is this possible? They don't even know how to hit topspin. They don't even know how to hit a proper, serve. They're just tapping it in. Guess what? If your toolkit, the technical, the mental, the tactical, the fitness, isn't developed enough to hit one more ball back inside the court than they do, they are the better player. You can make all the discussion and arguments you want about the aesthetic and what good tennis is and isn't, but at the end of the day, you have to respect that somebody else has focused on other tools more than you have, and as a result, they're able to play the game of tennis to a better degree than you are. I know that's hard to accept, but it's the reality. Curious what you think about this. I can't wait to share these new matches. I'm not going to, spoil the results at all. It was highly intriguing and highly entertaining as always when Ben's on the court. So if you want to see those, make sure you subscribe to the Real Tennis channel. All of them will be published in a couple weeks, maybe a month plus, depending on how our editing schedule stacks up. Hopefully this helps you have a little bit bigger, more healthy perspective on the game of tennis, and it helps you battle a little bit more effectively on the court against players who maybe at first blush aren't very good at tennis, but actually are very, very good at playing the game. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.